Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, July 12th Berlin Board of Education meeting. We are going to start the meeting. It's 6:05. We will call to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you everyone for being here this evening. So like I stated prior to the meeting beginning, there is a sheet going around for signups for audience of citizens. We will be going off of that list to call people up. And secondly, Mr. Benigni can reiterate what I said, but would you like to go ahead?
Sure. Being that we are inside and the policy still is that there should be 6 feet of distance between or a mask being worn. If you're sitting with your own family, that's fine. But the reason we are in the auditorium this evening, knowing that we would have people and guests here, that we're asking you to do that. If you are vaccinated, then you're able to sit as you are. We are required to tell you that. Should you choose to stay where you are, that is your choice. Obviously, you're here on your own accord.
All right, thank you. So we are going to start the meeting with committee reports. What did your committee meet?
Yes.
Do you have a report?
So the Communications Committee, we met twice between our last meetings. The things that we discussed were the ways to communicate, and one of them was the Berlin Citizen has no longer been running our columns, and it's been all year. So Brian's going to be reaching out to them. They haven't returned any emails, so if anybody is out there, we'd like a call back. And hopefully they can start running the columns again. We also talked about Facebook, and we never really did anything about it, so we talked about ways of engaging the community. Steve Weber's going to be taking over the Facebook page, and he'll be putting things like the tonight's meeting, things that the Berlin High YouTube page puts out all the time, basketball games, live events, and things like that, and kind of making it more engaging. And we also talked about our website and how we're going to be redesigning it. I'll hand it over to Mark, but basically the page will start showing pictures, emails and stuff, but I think he's got a template if you want to see it, and I think they're going to take our pictures in August.
Okay, the website, I've done some research on the website, and what we're doing is we're going to have pictures on there. We're going to have each committee member's name on there, along with which committees that they serve on. Also, there will be a link there where you'll be able to click to email any individual board member, and there will also be a link there to click to email the entire board so the entire board sees it. So if you want to go to one specific board member, you can do that. If you want to go to the president, you can do that. You want to go to secretary, you can do that, or you can email the whole board. But it is in the works. The website has been started to be formed on that, and the information will be updated, and probably by August, as we just stated, we'll have pictures, and it should be fully updated at that time.
All right, thank you. Did your committee meet?
We did. We met. The curriculum committee met just prior to this meeting to briefly discuss a book proposed for use in the 6th grade, and there will be a motion later in the meeting for adoption of that book.
Great, thank you. Correspondence to the board?
Yes, I have a few here. Dear Superintendent Benigni, Administrators of the Board of Education, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation for a wonderful, memorable evening of myself and Berlin School retirees. The event was beautiful. The Crystal Bowl will always treasured. Reminder supportive members of the district. My best wishes to you, Roz Stachin. Dear Bryant and members of the BOE, thank you very much for the beautiful Waterford Bowl. I was hand-delivered this week. It's stunning. I've enjoyed 16 magical years teaching our neediest little learners. Truly blessed, Jen Harris. Dear Ms. Dennis and the Board of Education, thank you so very much for the beautiful recognition on Monday evening. It was very heartwarming. I feel so appreciated. I just love the bowl. It was a very special gift, which I will treasure always. Nancy Cavalieri. Board of Education, Brian and Aaron, thank you very much for providing Box Bistro. It was a nice way to wrap up the school year, and the colleagues and friends at McGee, Sue Zybell. Dear Mr. Benigni, thank you very much for the generous offer of lunch on the Teacher's Day. It was very kind. and it was appreciated. Kevin Cormack. And the last one, dear Bryant and Board of Education, I'd like to thank you for the support throughout the school year. This is like no other. The stressors on educators, extended staff, administrators, all who wanted the best for our students was stretched and challenged in so many ways. New technologies, platforms, ways of balancing learning for all, management of students, emotional, physical, and academic growth took on new dimensions this year. I'd also like to say how much I appreciated the lunch on the last day. I love the support and the business in town, the same way of supporting our teachers. It was delicious and a nice way to end the year. It's a really nice way to end a challenging year. Thank you for your support, Danielle McCorkle, grade 6 teacher McGee. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. So we had a clipboard circulating for members of the community to sign up for audience of citizens. I have this sheet right here if you've already signed up. If you need to sign up, I will put it at the end of the table and you can continue to sign up if you have not already. I did receive a number of emails, but I'll let the audience of citizens speak first, and then I will read the emails that were requested to be read during audience of citizens. So I'm going to do my best to say names correctly when I call you up, but we're going to go based off of the sign up. And we have Barbara first. When you come up and address the board, if you could just go to a microphone and state your first and last name as well as your address.
Hello, my name is Barbara Sparkowski. I want to thank the board for allowing me to be here tonight on behalf of my children. We live at 15 Fairview Place. I do have 2 kids who are currently at Willard Elementary School. It's been an entirely challenging year, as I'm sure everyone here has known. I do want to appreciate everything you guys have done for us, but this is the product of what comes home when my 3-year-old has to wear a mask for just 2 hours in special education preschool. It's dry now, but when he did come home, it's wet, it's disgusting. There's no way this is science. This is not healthy for my children, and I'm sure a lot of other parents in here agree with me. It's disgusting that I'm in a place where I have to decide between the health and well-being of my kids and their education, because this is not acceptable. I can't put them through another year of these disgusting masks. They come home wet, kids have runny noses, the teachers aren't changing them. It's not their job. I understand that. They're not supposed to wipe their faces and make sure. I give him 3 to 4 masks to go to school with every day. He comes home in the same one. It's loaded with everything. So I beg of you, if this does come down to your choice, please don't do this to our kids. Thank you.
The next person, Carol. Yep.
I'd like to thank the school board for allowing public participation. At least we have a little bit of freedom left in certain areas, I guess, so thank you very much. And I just want to say that I don't have any animosity towards anyone personally on the board. Individually, I've met some of you, and I know some of you, and you're wonderful people. Others I haven't met. The superintendent, you know, I've met you through your emails, your COVID emails that I get regularly that have to be sent. I would like for the board to consider the impetus for this. If we're just following CDC guidelines because we want to protect children, and that's your goal, is to protect our children, who's going to protect them from the psychological scarring that they have from wearing these masks every single day? Who's going to protect them from developing respiratory illnesses because they're breathing this stuff in? Are you guys going to be responsible for that? Are you going to check in and make sure our kids are okay? Or as Barbara had spoken, are you guys going to walk around and make sure that the masks are clean? You're going to listen to the CDC? You're not going to maybe check it out and think for yourselves a little bit, which you're completely allowed to do, by the way. I mean, this is the CDC that gave syphilis to black men for 40 years. I'm not saying don't listen to them. I'm by no means saying that science doesn't work, and I'm not saying that, masks aren't fantastic or whatever, but they don't belong on our children. They've suffered enough. You have Dr. Fauci saying that masks don't work, then they work. Have you seen some of these masks? You can see through them. Would you wear one of those if you were working in a laboratory or at a hospital to protect yourself? You wouldn't. You're just doing this, and I understand why, because of liability. Sometimes you have to look past that. Sometimes you have to think for yourself, and you have to stand up for what's right. And that's more important than attorneys. That's more important than lawsuits. That's more important than any of that stuff. The school board is not a business. You're here to educate our children in an environment that promotes growth, learning. These masks are not promoting growth or learning. The kids they can't even read each other's faces. They don't know what kind of emotions to interpret. This is critical in the development of children. So I beg of you, please, stand up for what's right. Stand up for something you believe in, even though it's against the status quo. Make a decision here and now that goes against the grain. Regardless of whether you're going to be loved or hated for it, make a decision for the children. If it's not for anyone else, do it for the kids. It's your job. You're here, you're sitting at this table for these children. No one else, not for me. Are you going to stand up for the children? I hope you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, I know a few more people have come in since. There's a sign up at the end of the table, and I'm going based off of the sign up right here. Just due to the amount of people signed up, we're going to allow 3 minutes per person. And also be sure to state your name and address, and the Board of Education will respond after everyone has spoken. So I just wanted to clarify so you know why we're not responding in between each. So the next person is Kirsten O. So don't forget to state your full name and address.
My name is Kirsten Osman. I live at 53 Cindy Lane here in Berlin. I'm a proud mother of two amazing soon-to-be first graders at Willard. To be honest, I'm confused as to why masking our children is even a topic of conversation anymore. Prolonged and continued masking of students is child abuse, and it's detrimental to their mental health, emotional, and social well-being. From what I can see in the Berlin Board of Ed member handbook, it's the mission and goal of the board to, and I quote, serve the community by providing a well-rounded, fiscally responsible education with broad opportunities and freedom for every learner to strive for success. The last part is what really gets me, freedom. It's honestly one of my favorite words. It's what makes this country truly spectacular. I thought long and hard about whether or not I would bring my children to this meeting tonight. See, if this topic comes up at the dinner table or any time in front of them, they stop eating. They can't handle it. They start misbehaving. They have to leave the room. This has caused them more stress than I can ever imagine. I'm disgusted. I brought them here tonight because I wanted to remind them of their God-given freedom. I brought them here to illustrate how to respectfully use their voices and to stand up for what's right. Have you considered the amount of freedom you're robbing our children of when you maintain unnecessary mask mandates in our public schools? At the beginning of this past school year, I was reassured by Mr. Benigni that kids are resilient. Kids absolutely are resilient, but they should not have to be resilient to this. They are easily influenced and affected, especially when they are scared. The amount of fear and stress placed on these children every single day is horrifying. And while we were absolutely blessed with a teacher this past year in kindergarten, I will tell you that no matter how amazing a teacher they're placed with next year, they will not attend the Berlin schools again if masks are mandated. I was not allowed in my daughter's classroom at any point this year. Can you imagine watching your 4 or 5-year-old child walk into their first day of school to a building you've never seen the inside of, with people you've never met, and have to tell them that everything will be okay? Do you have any idea how terrifying that is for me and for my 4 turning 5-year-olds? Interestingly enough, though, when the incoming kindergarten students had orientation this spring, they were allowed to walk through my children's classroom. They hadn't been in there all year, but they were allowed in. Logic has flown out the window. I was also told that if one child had COVID but their sibling did not, the sibling was allowed to come to school. Also makes no sense. The inconsistency is confusing to the kids and their families. I've spoken to PAs, APRNs, doctors, and nurses at the Connecticut Children's Emergency Room, pediatricians' offices, urgent care centers, all of whom have informed me, and I quote, "Kids are not getting COVID, and if they are, it's just a cold. COVID is no longer a serious concern. Unless you're a high-risk individual, you don't need to worry." And my personal favorite, we haven't seen a new pediatric positive case in months. My children cannot breathe, they cannot talk, they cannot understand their teachers, be understood by their teachers and friends, see the smiles of the faces in their school with all these masks. It's an act of child abuse to maintain a mask mandate in our school systems, and I refuse to support it. My children crave normalcy, they crave socially appropriate and supportive learning environment. I expect more from our state and community leaders and support systems. Masks are being made optional in towns across the state and country, and I urge you to make this happen for Berlin. It's not up to you or our governor to decide what my child wears on her face. It's up to me, and I'm saying no.
Thank you. The next person on the list is Adam Bryers.
Good evening. Adam Bryers, 46 Cobblestone Road. I'm a father of 3 in town, but I'm also a first grade teacher. This year was a major emphasis on social emotional learning. We taught kids empathy, we taught kids cooperation, we taught kids to work together. First graders are clumsy, they knock things over. So whether we were teaching a lesson on cooperation or helping each other, when a kid has a pencil box on their desk loaded with crayons and colored pencils and sharpeners and everything, they knock that over. Kids immediately saw it fall, it spill, it all over the floor. And here we are. We taught cooperation, we taught empathy, and kids would immediately dive to the floor to help each other. But then they saw the mask on the other kid's face. They didn't know what to do. Are they supposed to help each other or stay 6 feet apart? Is it safe to go near each other and help clean up a little bit, help a fellow classmate out, or sit back and watch because they could get a very dangerous virus, a terribly dangerous disease that has taken the life of one child under the age of 0 to 9. So I looked and I said, from a social emotional learning, I'm teaching one thing through the curriculum, but my kids in my class are learning a completely different lesson because those masks are saying, stay away, don't help each other, don't cooperate, keep to yourself. And I don't think that's the lesson that we want to teach, and I think that we need to do better. Because if we're going to teach social emotional learning, we need to put it in action. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. The next, I see 4 names on the list that were crossed out, so I'm assuming people crossed their own names out. So we'll go to Abby V. Sorry, I'm not going with the full last name. I don't want to mess it up too bad.
My name is Abby Valdesi. I live on 41 Elizabeth Road. I'm an incoming 9th grade student at Berlin High School. In school, we are always taught to think for ourselves, not to follow others who won't be a positive influence on us. Listen to our parents and put forth our best efforts when it comes to our studies. This year was difficult for many, including myself. I am not just talking about online learning. Fear of what is happening in the country, feeling of sadness and isolation. arguing with or even losing friends because of wearing versus not wearing a mask, getting the shot versus not getting the shot, and going with my beliefs, which may or may not be the beliefs of others. We were always told to follow the rules, but what about when those rules may be harmful to me? In school, I studied the Declaration of Independence, as well as discussed it many times at home. It reads, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safetyness and happiness." You have listened to parents tonight, have read emails that were sent from those who could not attend the meeting, and have seen or read the many articles and statistics that show the emergency is over and that there is no service which says that masks work to protect people from viruses. We have seen more science that they are harmful in many ways. To be effective, a school board must work with the community, school staff, and stakeholders. Tonight, I'm asking you to do just that and write a letter to Government Lamont to unmask the kids of Berlin. Will you do that for us? I also ask that when you vote on the topic of masks for the upcoming school year, it be a family's personal choice and not the choice of a governing body. A choice that will have a positive effect on safety, those who are comforted by a mask, and those who feel it negatively impacts their health and ability to learn, and happiness, free from ridicule, segregation, and fear, as intended when the Declaration of Independence was written on July 4th, 1776. Thank you for your time, and the respect I know you will give to my request. Thank you.
Abby, thank you so much for that. I think as a student getting up here and speaking, it shows that you're very well spoken, and you probably made Mr. Urso very proud. So the next one is Pam. Okay.
Good evening, Board of Education members and residents of Berlin. My name is Pam V. I live at 41 Elizabeth Road here in Berlin. So I've been a resident here in Berlin for about 23 years. I have a son who graduated from Berlin High School, class of 2018, and a daughter who's beginning 9th grade this fall. Never in a million years would I have thought that I'd be standing here today to plead to the Berlin Board of Education for the mental and physical safety of my child. We as a nation have been through a lot this past year, and I understand that. It's now becoming evident that there's information and disinformation, truth and fake news, politics versus freedom of pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. I also understand that my freedom to care for the well-being of my child is at stake. There are many who practice medicine who have put their practices and reputations on the line by speaking out publicly on their research, finally only to be censored, discriminated against, or even threatened. There have been politicians who have been very vocal about our rights as Americans and how they're being violated, and then those politicians who see it as an opportunity to further a separate agenda. There have been parents like me all across the United States who are standing up for what we believe and standing up for the health and well-beings of our families. I don't feel I have to stand up here and cite article after article to you. You've seen them all, you've read them, and probably passed them along to others. The impact of masks on children is a negative one. The significant buildup of carbon dioxide in children who wear them goes well beyond what is considered healthy for indoor air. The Journal of American Medical Association published an article just on June 30th, 2021, with respect to an experimental clinical assessment of carbon dioxide content in inhaled air with and without face masks in healthy children. All families that participated in this study had given written informed consent. They found that complaints reported by children, headaches, dizziness, restlessness, difficulty breathing, sweating, and tiredness, just to name a few, can be understood as consequences of elevated carbon dioxide levels in inhaled air. And this is because of the dead space volume of the mask, which collects exhaled carbon dioxide quickly after a short period of time. This carbon dioxide mixes with fresh air and elevates the carbon dioxide content of inhaled air under the mask, and it was more pronounced in this study for the younger children. These researchers concluded that decision makers weigh the hard evidence produced by these experimental measurements accordingly, which suggests that children should not be forced to wear face masks. While in school, we want our children to be awake, free of headaches and dizziness, breathing normally, and just ready to learn. How is this possible with a piece of material is covering their mouths and noses? Even Dr. Fauci's emails, if you believe in what he says, prove that he knew that masks don't work against the spread of COVID-19. Lisa Brichot, Doctor of Science, is a nationally recognized expert on infectious diseases. Brichot taught for many years at the University of Illinois at Chicago and co-wrote an opinion piece that drew a lot of notice. In Brichot's argument that cloth masks offer no protection from COVID-19, as one might imagine, it drew a lot of attention and caused a fair amount of controversy. She said, and I quote, "I don't necessarily discourage the public from wearing them if masks make them feel comfortable, but I hope they don't think that they're protecting themselves. Science says you shouldn't wear masks. I understand that the superintendent, town council members, board of education members, and principal of schools need to run the school system like a business, thinking of funding, student scores, and other parents that don't necessarily think like me or some of the ones that are sitting here today. But the profit in this business are the students. These masks have medical threats, psychological threats, including instilling fear. They impede a person from recognizing others' emotions and nonverbal cues. They promote segregation of those who choose to wear them and those who don't, and they may violate a person's sincere religious belief. It became clear early on that children and teens are at very low risk from COVID-19 with a 99.997% survival rate, and there is a cure, which we were told early on. So no emergency, pandemic, health orders, executive orders, school policies, rules, recommendations, regulations, guidelines, directives, or measurements suspend constitutional rights. I call on you guys to show me and the parents and the students proof of how the masks and distancing 3 or 6 feet apart work. Show me the science that is clinically trialed, peer-reviewed, and that can be repeated showing the same results. Until then, it's time to unmask our kids.
Thank you, Pam. Next up is Mary Catherine.
Good evening, everyone. Mary Catherine LaRose, 26 Woodruff Lane, Kensington. I've lived in town for 44 years. I'm not here as a parent. I'm here as a lifelong public school teacher. I taught in New Britain for 35 years in the public schools, middle school, elementary. And then when I retired, I didn't know what to do with myself, so I went back to substitute teaching 2 to 3 days a week. This last year, I thought long and hard about whether I was going to go back to substitute teaching, but they were so shorthanded that I said, okay, I'll try. When I went in the first day to substitute teach, well, let's just say I went home and I wanted to cry. The children that were in school, because New Britain was doing something, hybrid, there were 5 kids in a room. Their eyes were dead. There was no affect. They sat like little robots. And that was the way the whole year pretty much went. There was some improvement as the year went on, and there was some loosening of the masks, like they could go out to recess and have their mask off. And then I got to see what some of the masks looked like on the inside when they were wearing the same mask for the whole week. And then there were the kids who didn't have their own mask, and so every day they would come to school and someone from the school would hand them either a pink or a blue paper mask. If anyone thinks those paper masks are doing anything, you've got to be crazy. The damage that I feel is being done to the kids, or has been done for the last, 14 months, 15 months, may not be repairable. I hope that children are as resilient as we hope they are, and they're going to get over this, and they're going to get back to the joy of life. But if you keep them masked like they've been, I just don't see that happening. And when I think about a 5-year-old, 1/4 of their life was spent in a mask. And when you think that really their conscious life is a lot shorter than 5 years, that's maybe half their life spent in a mask. I will not go back to substitute teaching if the masks are mandated in New Britain. I can't do anything about it, but I can speak here and speak to you people. And I'm so glad that Adam got up as a teacher also, because I think it's really important that teachers have to, step forward and say, none of this makes sense. It needs to stop.
Thank you. Catherine Mady, you're next.
Hello, I'm Catherine Mady. I live at 193 Winesap Road. I am completely disturbed that all of our children, the least vulnerable to COVID-19 and the most susceptible to psychological harm from continual masking, are we still going to force them to wear masks this school year? Are we going to put them through this again? Our children have been taught to be scared of germs and COVID. They cannot hug or touch or even see each other's emotions or facial expressions. These facial expressions are a process that facilitates empathetic connections between the teachers and the students. This potentially can lead to a significant increase in socio and psychological stress. Scientific studies have proven and shown that their kids are either immune to COVID or have little to no symptoms. So again, why are we forcing us to put masks on our children? One of my major concerns is especially for the kids that are just learning to speak properly and to read. They have a really hard time mimicking the sound behind a mask. How are they supposed to look in a teacher's face and say, this is how you say the? Repeat it to me. You can't, because you can't see the teacher's mouth. Over the course of this pandemic, 49,000 Americans under the age of 18 have died of all causes, and that's according to the CDC. Only 331 of those deaths have been from COVID. Let that sink in. 331 across the country. More than 2,000 kids have died in car crashes, 1,000 die from drowning. It's just time to take the masks off. As Pam said, there's studies about wearing these masks in children for minutes before they were inhaling 6 times the amount of carbon dioxide that is acceptable for adults. The younger the children, the higher the concentration of carbon dioxide our children are breathing in. If your goal is to protect the children, why are you enforcing this and having them endure this mask? Since the masks mandates have been lifted, our children have been and continue walking around all summer at birthday parties, vacations, aquariums, free museums. Why are we masking the children? I implore you to drop the mask mandate for the 2021-22 school year, and if that's not possible, at the very least, please make it optional. Let us parents have a voice and choose to what we want our children to wear or not wear. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is Joe Mata.
How you doing, board? I'm Joe Mata. I live at 69 Eastbrook Terrace. I got 3 children, 2 twins that attend this high school, and an 8th grader at McGee. Now, the thing that upset me the most was at the end of the school year, my daughter comes home from school one day, and it was 90 degrees plus outside. The students asked a staff member that works here, their teacher, if they could take a mask break. Now, many teachers allow these students throughout the year to go outside and take mask breaks. Teachers themselves need mask breaks, because who wants to be in a stupid mask 8 hours a day? So they go outside, but then the teacher tells them to stand 6 feet apart, and you're not allowed to remove your mask. So what was the whole business of having a mask break? You might as well just stayed inside the school where the air conditioning was on. You're outside in the heat wearing the mask. And that really upset me. I wanted to call the school, but it was a few days before the end of the school year. So I'm like, you know what? I'm sure the schools are going to have common sense and get rid of these stupid masks come September, which honestly, and the woman here whose daughter's about to start school, she hit everything, the nail on the head. So I don't want to sound redundant. Everything you said, ma'am, is what I was going to say. You know, and another thing, which I would love for you guys to explain this, is I see a few familiar faces on this board, and a lot of you guys attended the same baseball game I attended a month ago, Palmer Field, Middletown. Anybody remember that night? It was a nice evening. Nobody wore a mask. Every kid in this school was elbow to elbow, drinking out of each other's cups, sharing popcorn. But then come Monday morning, you got to put your mask on. So I guess COVID only exists Monday through Friday between the hours of... I'm not... Just like when you go into a restaurant, you go into a restaurant, you got to wear the mask until you sit down, and then everything disappears. But anyways, what I ask from you guys is, I know you got to vote on it. I know you guys have to answer to the higher-ups, but sometimes you got to tell the higher-ups where to go, because this isn't fair, and don't put politics with these children. It doesn't belong. Politics stays with politics, because all the politicians, they can deal with it. But you guys work for us, work for those kids, and that's what's important. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. The next person is Alexis M.
Adam's way too tall for me, sorry. Okay, this is probably good. Thank you. I did not intend to speak, but when the sign-up sheet came around, I felt compelled. Oh, Alexis Malika, 845 Kensington Road. Sorry.
Thank you.
I'm here as a parent. I have 3 students, 2 in school, 1 that will be going to school soon. We delayed preschool for 1, and my daughter going into kindergarten didn't get to go to preschool this year after having been at Willard the year prior. I'm also a teacher turned stay-at-home mom, was looking to go back to work. As a teacher and a parent, the masks to me just don't work. We've kept our kids home and we've done the remote learning just out of our own personal beliefs. That's how strong our beliefs are. We're willing to be home on 1 income with our children, not able to utilize the Berlin Public Schools, which we've grown to love. I was the PTO vice president. We're super invested in the town, in the schools, and the past year and a half has been like a total game changer for my family. It's totally changed our dynamic. We're home together. We're missing out on all the great things that Berlin has to offer. My son being remote, he's been remote for half of his education. It's like he's literally being taught by an iPad, which his teacher, Mrs. Jutrish, she was amazing, and we grew to love her even though I was nervous at first. It just is not the same. Like, I'm in the other room hearing them, and it's just, as a teacher, it breaks my heart because I know what school has to offer, and my kids are greatly missing out. Moving forward, planning for my family, if Berlin does not remove the mask mandate or make it optional, we will be going to a private school and probably not ever returning to Berlin Public Schools, and that breaks my heart as a teacher who wanted to get into the system, who's grown to love the community that my son has been a part of. To hear about the Berlin Fair, his teacher telling them it's probably happening this year, and then my son saying, well, if we have to wear a mask, I won't be able to go because my mom doesn't let us wear masks. Well, everyone else is talking about the games and the food and meeting up. It's like my son is always feeling excluded. So no matter how you slice or dice it, the psychological damage is there. Either I put a mask on him, which is against my beliefs and I would never do that, and he suffers psychologically from a mask, or I keep him home and he psychologically suffers because he's at home without his friends. Like, we go to birthday parties of kids in other towns and they all have this tight-knit group, and my son has made one friend out of his remote class that we see outside. It's disheartening as a parent and as a teacher. I really just urge you to just bring normal back. The pandemic, like he had said, has disappeared from, the weekend on. Monday through Friday, all of a sudden, everyone's afraid of COVID. It's just unbelievable that we live in a town with a great school and my family will not be able to utilize that school system because it goes against what we believe. And when we read the science, we're not willing to compromise what we believe so strongly that we would pass up a great education and find education elsewhere. So I urge you guys, make it optional or take it away completely, but let my kids back in Berlin Public Schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I call the last person up, we have one more person signed up. I have a number of emails I'm going to read. The sign-up sheet is at the end of the table, so if you do want to speak before we end this part of the meeting, the sign-up sheet is at the end of the table. And then the last person to speak before I get into the emails is Niki S. Simbitsky. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay. My name is Niki Sambitsky, and I live on 947 Chamberlain Highway in Berlin. And I have two kids. My two kids are here with me. They go to Willard. They both are special needs. They have autism. I wrote a long letter to the board, but I'm not going to read it all. I'll just read some of it. I'm a voter. I'm concerned about the unnecessary power and almost unlimited authority given to our governor through the Civil Preparedness Emergency Acts. Because of the unnecessary mask mandates, we opted to do remote learning for our two children with autism. We had a medical note that stated our children could not wear masks because of sensory issues with their autism, and that was not properly being recognized by the school system. Because of that, we opted to do remote learning. Even though the kids did great and had wonderful support, I still dealt with many difficult behavioral issues that impacted their learning. On any given day, I was pinched, bitten, yelled at, kicked, and ran away from. If my children were able to attend school as normal, they would have been properly supported throughout the school day. The teachers and support staff did the very best they could via Zoom sessions, but nothing replaces in-person services and learning. We had to hire a lawyer to have our kids attend ESY this year and school next year mask-free. Even though we legally fought to have our children be mask-free through our medical note, there's no saying that this will change at the stroke of the governor's pen. But what about other students who do not have this option? Our children need to breathe free and just be kids. The masks are causing unnecessary mental health issues, as well as general health issues in our children. Science shows that the survival rate of COVID is quite high in children and individuals who do not have any other comorbidities. In fact, the survival rate is around 99.7% on average. We need to return to school as normal. Our children cannot thrive in the governor's new normal. Likewise, segregating our children by vaccinated and unvaccinated is also highly unethical, just as it was so many years ago to segregate people by the color of their skin. The new CDC guidance is nothing more than segregation. And in the email that I sent everybody, I do have links that back up what I'm saying. Parents should have the ultimate decision when it comes down to the health and well-being of their children. I also sent a study regarding the Delta variant, and it clearly states that it's basically akin to bad allergies or the common cold. But if you talk to the governor, he'll probably tell you opposite of that. Going along the lines of what Pam said, I'm going to cite what she was talking about from that JAMA study regarding that face mask caused children to inhale 6 times the safe limit of carbon dioxide. From that study, quote, "The limitations of the study were its short-term nature in a laboratory-like setting and the fact that children were not occupied during measurements and might have been apprehensive. Most of the complaints reported by children can be understood as consequences of elevated carbon dioxide levels in inhaled air. This is because of the dead space volume of the mask, which collects exhaled carbon dioxide quickly after a short time. This carbon dioxide mixes with fresh air and elevates the carbon dioxide content of inhaled air under the mask, and this was more pronounced in this study for younger children. This leads in turn to impairments attributable to hypercapnia. A recent review concluded that there was ample evidence for adverse effects of wearing such masks. We suggest that decision makers weigh the hard evidence produced by these experimental measurements accordingly, which suggests that children should not be forced to wear face masks." End quote. Our children also do not need plexiglass barriers and social distancing. They've been isolated enough. I am not a virologist, but I have studied anatomy and physiology enough to know that if you're going to get sick with something, no amount of masking or plexiglass or social distancing will prevent it from happening. It all boils down to taking care of your body and boosting your God-given immune system. Please let our kids return to school as normal. We are not accepting any new normal. Masks, plexiglass, social distancing, COVID testing, mandated vaccines, or any other dystopian thing that our government wants to throw at us. Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Gabriela L. I live at 35 Cobblestone Road. I'm not going to repeat all the science because everyone, I think, will say it much better than I will. But a short little personal story about us is we just moved to town in March. We have a lot of connections in town. We worked our asses off to live in Berlin, and we picked it purposely for the schools. Back in December, my husband, who's a correctional officer, came down with COVID while wearing 2 masks at work every day, an N95 as well as a cloth mask. He had to do hospital runs, and that's how he caught it. He gave it to me at home, and both of our children, who are going into kindergarten and first grade, were fine. They lived with patient X for 3 weeks and were fine, not a runny nose. I had them tested. They both had it. We quarantined for 3 weeks, which felt like 6 months. But we quarantined. We did everything we were supposed to do, but our children were fine. So I urge you to please let them be kids and not wear a mask. Thank you.
You can go up right from there. You can speak next. Yep. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Carter Lavoie, and I just finished my first year of 6th grade. And wearing a mask for me was just not good because my first year of 6th grade was so much different than what it could have been because of wearing the mask and all of these mandates. So I couldn't do what all the other kids did last year because of all of these rules and what this is, and it's just not fair for those kids that couldn't do everything else that they were doing, which is just not fair for everyone else. So if you're going to keep this up and we're not going to be able to do this next year either, then that's just not going to be fair for anyone else, and no one is going to like this, and no one's going to want to come back to school.
I like when the kids speak, it's cute. So cute, yeah. You can go ahead. Yep, you can, just leave it down there, it's fine.
Jessica Patra, 420 Lower Lane. I wasn't going to speak, but after listening to everybody, it really triggered something in my phone that I've been tracking. And after hearing Pam, actually it was, I've been tracking this last year. My daughter's been having dizzy spells. We've never had this problem before. I also have had multiple conversations with people in the school before school began about how I 100% refuse to send my children to school with a mask. It's super against what me and my husband believe. And I had my 5-year-old at the time look at me with tears in her eyes. Mommy, I want to go to school with my friends. I don't care if I have to wear a mask. So what did I do? I can't take what I feel and hold it against her if that's what she really wants to do. My daughter also ended the school year crying. I don't want to go to school, Mommy. I hate being in school. Now, this is a very social little girl who loves her friends, who loves her teachers, and who loves the majority of the staff in her school. She doesn't want to go to school because she can't hug her friends. She can't be next to her friends. She can't play with her friends closely on the playground without taking her mask off. If something happens to one of her friends, she's scared to help them because they're not supposed to be near each other. What are we teaching these kids? This goes against everything that I've ever taught her as my child, and as all of us are supposed to be teaching these kids. She also is incredibly brave. The first day of first grade, actually, when they did the reverse parade last year, my kindergartner, as we drove through, everybody was screaming her name. She seriously felt like a celebrity, and she still feels like a celebrity. She walked into school on for her first day of first grade, and I've never seen such fear in her eyes. She was so afraid to walk through that door. I now have a 4-year-old that's starting kindergarten. I've now also started exploring private schools options because I am not sending my kids one more year with these things covering their face. It's not healthy for them, in which now I'm starting to make a connection that her dizzy spells are most likely linked to her wearing this mask. And I'm not even kidding, I just made the connection as Pam was speaking, and which is what made me come up to speak because I had zero intentions. My 4-year-old is not as brave as her sister. She knows 2 people in that school, and that's only because she's seen them regularly. Mrs. Soroyce is one of them. So I'm to send her into that building where she knows Mrs. Soroyce, one other teacher, and her sister. It's not gonna go well for her. And as her mother, I'm also gonna be starting a new job, and that's what I need to worry about. So, if it's left up to you guys, we beg you please to either make it optional or remove them altogether. And if not, we will not be attending Berlin Public Schools.
Thank you, everyone who got up and spoke. The Board of Education, we did receive a number of emails, and I did my best to reply to all of them, and for those who weren't able to make it tonight, I'm doing my best to read all of the emails that were requested to be read, because not all emails are intended to be read during audience of citizens. And if I received your email by 5 p.m., I hope that it's included. If it's not, it was not intentional. There were just a lot to go through. So the first one is Julie Arcila, Arcila, 192 Hudson Street. My daughter had mono and was unable to attend school consistently the last few months of school. She was able to school virtually while addressing her physical and mental health needs. Since high school is stressful for our students, being able to present online daily helped my daughter reach her educational potential. I hope Berlin Schools District explores the continued use of online learning. Thank you. The next one is, I'm going to do my best to say the names correctly, Sylvia Zolterbruch, thank you. It's Zoltobrzeuch, and that's 23 Galpin Lane. I'm a resident of Berlin, but most importantly, a mom of 3 students in the Berlin school system. I write to you today asking you to please unmask our kids. The whole situation with COVID and its protocols have severely messed with our children's mental well-being. My children are Isabella, 11, Emma, 7, and David, 5. When the state decided to shut down last year due to COVID, I understood it for a little bit since it was something new and scary, but as time went by, more and more of the situation didn't make sense. From the very beginning, it was said that children do not spread the virus, and any who will test positive for it will not have many severe symptoms or any at all. Then why were children kicked out of schools while parents and adults were still allowed to work and big stores remained open? My oldest daughter became sad and depressed due to lack of seeing her friends and routines she had known for so many years that when the time came, she decided to quit dancing after 7 years because she didn't want to do it behind a screen and not be able to spend time with her friends and hug them. My middle daughter, Emma, suffered the worst. 2 weeks after the state and Board of Education shut down the school, we found a bald spot on the crown of her head. The pediatrician confirmed it was balding due to stress. At the age of 5, being told you can't return to school because there's a sickness out there causing people to die and stay away from family really affects children who want to play and socialize. This year, when she returned to school in masks, she wasn't able to hug, high five, or play closely with friends. She came home crying hysterically many times because she thought someone was upset with her. Why, you ask? Because she couldn't see people's faces. That reassuring smile that a 6-year-old needs to know she's doing a good job. Her teacher was absolutely amazing in trying to help with the situation in a safe as possible way, but it's not the same without that forever smile that's plastered on a teacher's face behind the mask. I'm sure many people have sent you the statistics to back the findings that their children do not need to be masked, or any of us for that matter. But I'm not here to give you that. I want you to be aware of the situation that is happening with the children's mental well-being and give you personal examples of children right here in your state and town. Please make the mask optional this upcoming year. This way the parents have a choice to do what they feel is right and safe for their kids. I thank you so much for taking the time to read this email and hope that you make the decision to do what's right for all families. The next email is Eva Lazuk, 250 Longview Drive. I'm not a rebel. I'm usually a go with the grain. It is what it is kind of a person. But we moved after my then kindergartner had to do half of the school year online. After a plan came out for the following year, school 2 days a week on week 1, 3 days a week on week 2, back and forth, not only masks to be worn, but masks covered by plastic shields. No backpacks allowed because of germs, I assume, but carry your laptop in its bag, but don't lose it on the bus. My oldest was going into 1st grade and my middle one into kindergarten. So we moved. We moved to Berlin for better schools, for better plan, and for better future for my 3 children. Just a mask wasn't bad compared to a mask shield. They were able to attend school 5 days a week as opposed to a schedule that made no sense. Kids finish their school year in Berlin. They've made friends. They love their teachers at Griswold. But would they recognize their teacher on the street if they didn't have their mask on? We've had birthday parties. We've invited school friends. You know what I noticed? Uncertainty from my newly 6-year-old. As her friends got out of their cars to come see her, she had to look for guidance from me. Can she go near them? Can she give them a hug? It made me think, and it made me sad. COVID and the precautions that come with it, while meant to help their physical health, are ruining my kids' emotional well-being. Yes, kids are resilient. Masks have become their new normal, and my kids didn't ask questions at all. They do question them now. Why can we have larger gatherings now with no masks? Why can we go into restaurants and stores without a mask and no one batting an eye, but we have to wear them all day at school? I could throw a bunch of statistics your way, and I'm sure most emails are just that, but I know that you've read those statistics. You know the numbers. What you don't know is how hard it is sometimes for my kids to read someone's face with a mask on. Heck, it's sometimes hard for me. Not everyone conveys emotion through their eyes. You don't know how many times my kid asks me, when will the virus be gone? Or when the virus is gone, can we go, to a million different places? The virus isn't gone, but it's now months and months later, and we have learned to live with it. My kids learned to wash their hands more often than I would have had them do it, to wash their desks with chemicals before lunch, as my daughter calls it, to stay away from each other. And some of those are great practices, ones I'm glad they learned, but how long can you sit next to their friend? How long until they can sit next to their friends at lunch? How long until they experience human interaction from less than 6 feet away outside home? Wearing a mask didn't stop my daughter's class from going virtual last year because the whole class was considered a very close contact. Wearing a mask didn't stop my kids from catching a cold. Wearing a mask did stop my kids from looking across the classroom and seeing their best friend smile. Summer camp started last week. My kids didn't recognize their counselors from last year. They were masked last summer, and this year they're not. But they did recognize their friends. It was joyous to watch. Both of my kids' camp agreed the best part of the first day was seeing everyone again with no masks on. You can't deny it's nice going into a coffee shop in the morning, a gas station, and even grab a gallon of milk and have a quick conversation now, as seeing full facial expressions and smiles make a world of difference. Imagine the difference it makes for the kids. My youngest will be going into pre-K in September. She, like my others, is used to wearing a mask, but I wish she didn't have to. My wish for my 3 children is to bring some normalcy back. The old normalcy, not the new one. I understand that they may not be able to hug at school or sit too close to each other, but please let them see each other's faces, let them breathe. I'm asking for masks to be optional. I fully understand there are kids whose parents feel more comfortable with a mask, send your kid in a mask. If my kids have the sniffles, I'd be glad to send them in with a mask when they go back to school as a precaution for a few days. But it should be just that, an option. It should be me deciding what's best for my children, and as of right now, what is best for them to go back to normal. Yes, kids are resilient, but the question is, should they have to be this long? The next email is from Christina Leo, 38 Leal. Christina Leal, 38 Tanglewood Court, I believe. I am writing regarding the upcoming decision about mandating that our kids wear masks in Berlin, Connecticut for the upcoming school year. Please let the parents decide if they want their kids to wear masks. Our kids are tired of wearing masks. Continue to require masks for children is causing them unnecessary stress and anxiety in addition to potential health risks. Our kids are not at risk. All adults/teachers that want to be vaccinated have had ample opportunity to do so. Let our kids be free and enjoy their childhood and school days as they should. Again, they are not at risk. Mandating masks is an overreach on the part of our government. This is America. Let the parents decide what is best for their kids and their family. Please know the unique needs, challenges, and health considerations for their kids better than anyone else. Parents are the best candidate to make informed and educated decisions for their children. I urge you to please fight on behalf of our children against a mask mandate for the 2021 school year. Thank you again. The next email is from Adam Lozis, Lozis, 44 York Road. As indicated in the Connecticut Mirror on 7/1/21 in the Hartford Current, Governor Lamont is seeking to renew yet again his executive powers, which are sweeping and far-reaching into our and our children's lives under the, quote, an act concerning the declaration of renewal of civil preparedness and public health emergency by the governor, end quote. The last time around, the powers were renewed through House Bill 6686, a temporary law that is supposed to expire on 7/20/21. HB 6686 was passed into law by the Connecticut General Assembly. See how your representative and senator voted on HB 6686 last time the renewal occurred in mid-May 2021. Governor Lamont conveyed he is not ready to lift the mask mandates. In the fall on NBC Connecticut News on 6/30/21, an emergency meeting of the General Assembly will be called any day now to vote on renewing powers. HB 6686 is a temporary law that allows Governor Lamont to not only mask our kids, but control our lives and the livelihoods with almost no checks and balances from the Connecticut representatives and senators whom we elected to represent us. If mask mandates remain in place on the statewide or local level, I would also like to know if distance learning will be an option in place as it was in the 2020-2021 school year. My daughter, who has asthma, had a great year of distance learning with Mrs. Marshall and is now heading on into 4th grade. Due to her condition, we have given her a choice of activities to participate in. One was soccer, which she loves, but chose not to. And at 8 years old at the time, she said, "What good does it do to your body to exercise and starve yourself of oxygen?" Smart kid. One more concern I'd like to address is that I have been hearing of teacher unions pushing the curriculum of critical race theory and wanted to see if this has been brought up in Berlin school curriculum. Some of the things that I have heard, which concerned me and I feel would push to divide rather than unite the people. It is my belief that everybody should be treated equal and no preferential treatment given to any race or demographic. And then the next one is from all right, and then we have Pamela Lavery of 126 Wilkes Pond Road. I am requesting that this Board of Education make math optionals for all students pre-K through grade 12. The data supports that students are not at any significant risk of contracting or spreading COVID-19. This needs to stop being a political issue that impacts our children's emotional, academic, educational, speech, language, physical, and social well-being. I understand that the governor of Connecticut wants the federal funding associated with a statewide emergency, and to trade that funding for our children's overall health is despicable. Please vote to make math optional for all school-aged children. Let parents make the decision that are in the best interests of the children. Thank you, Pamela Lavery. And then the last one I have is just from a parent that shared about her daughter, and typically we need to, state the name and address on the record. I'm not going to read the story, but just talking about it's really taking a toll on her daughter's self-esteem, and her daughter was crying about it. And, because of her daughter's age, she did not want her name read, so I just said I would give that summary. So thank you, everyone, for coming out this evening. Would anyone on the Board of Education like to respond? So typically with audience of citizens, it's not a back and forth. We hear you and then we take the information for our next meetings. But if anyone has anything, I know that this is important to all of you guys, and I appreciate your time this evening. I know for a lot of you, it's not easy getting up and speaking, so thank you for the emails. If any emails weren't read, it wasn't intentional. There were just a lot that came through. Would you like to say anything before we move on?
Sure. Many of you commented about why you came to Berlin. This is my 29th year in the Berlin Public Schools. Started as a teacher years ago. Some of you were my students, or I've coached you. And, you know, to come out as a community is representative of Berlin, and that's what makes Berlin a great place. So I can say to you that I am definitely hearing you. I know the board's hearing you, and you also know that there's other things that we need to deal with and moving forward. But I think that the message that's being communicated is something all of us are hearing this evening, and I think that all of you would take an evening, and some of you that prepared words to also share, whether it was emailed to us this past week or to move up to the microphone, it's important. But please know our mission this past year, as difficult as it was for you, the people sitting at this table and myself, it was very difficult for all of us to make the decisions we made. But our first and foremost was student safety and is student safety, and the next was continuity of instruction. So those two positions have not changed, and I ask you to think that we are hearing you and that we will be moving forward to a reopening plan with your thoughts in mind, as well as other positions too that we need to listen to, whether I know when you said you need to step up and move beside what the CDC says and what the governor says and so on. Some of you, there is a position that we need to look at what's right for all students, and I know that's what you're saying this evening. So I guess what I'm saying to you is coming out has definitely been heard, and I can share with you that audiences is not typically where there's a, you know, every time someone speaks, someone comments back. But we're not going to be making a decision on the reopening plan until the August meeting. We know that there's the 21st of July is when the governor, or the 20th is when the governor decides on whether his power is continued we will be posting, though, a draft plan because we need to for some funding and so on. And I think that, you know, what the proposal will be discussed by the board. The board will discuss my recommendations of what that proposal will be. It will be posted to the website and discussed. So, what's that? It's going to be discussed this evening, the proposal. It'll be, once it's discussed and hopefully passed this evening, it'll be posted tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. So, and you know, you can look right to the web. It'll be on the front page. You hit the link, you'll open to the plan. It's a draft, and then we're going to see what transpires over the next month or so. And obviously, we'll update that draft plan. So.
All right. Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Can everybody hear me? I just want to take a moment to thank all of you.
Could you just say your name and address?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
My name is Donna Veach. I live at 1218 High Road here in Kensington. I've been a resident for over 35 years. I'm a mom of 3 daughters that have gone through this system and a soon-to-be grandmother in about a month. So my kids are not in school currently, but I have to say, I commend all of you for coming up and speaking up to take the masks off, and I hope that the Board of Education is listening loud and clear, and Governor Lamont will not get my vote on Wednesday, because enough is enough. I thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for that. Quite the showstopper, Donna.
So I just talked to Julie, our board chair. In the proposal for the reopening plan, it's a draft proposal. And this is before all of your comments, but definitely with your emails. I just asked her if she'd like to read the suggestion. Now, we're going to talk about it this evening, but
I think I've read enough for the night, but
they might want to hear this one.
Yeah. The whole page?
I think you just need to read it, right?
Yeah, they just want that.
Just,
Okay,
okay.
that's what they want to hear.
I was going to read the whole page. Well, I'll just start at the top anyway. We take the protection of our students and staff very seriously. We will rely heavily on the guidance of the Central Connecticut Health District to review our local health data and monitor community transmission, spread of the virus, and respond appropriately. So if masks are not required by the state of Connecticut, Department of Public Health, or the Central Connecticut Health District, staff and students will be allowed to make a choice about whether to wear them. This decision may be based on grade level, as older students may be vaccinated and younger students are not. Keep going?
That's it.
Okay, so that is in our, what we are gonna, approving our draft this evening is an agenda item, and that is written in there. So, you know, I think we need to continue to put the pressure on the state. I think it's important that, without stating my views or opinions, but.
I have no problem sending a letter stating that we had a group of parents and X number of emails come in and voice their opinion. You know, so I have no problem writing a letter. But I don't believe, and you know, and I'll say this candidly, I'll definitely write a letter on the group that has come forward and where the sentiment is in Berlin. You know, and I think that everyone has their own beliefs, and as many of you mentioned this evening. So, but I definitely don't voicing that we had a group come together at this stage, and X number of emails and people speaking and students speaking, and there's, you know, strong sentiment to do that. I mean, I did have conversations with our health department in the last week, and he's aware that there's also a group in Berlin that feels very strongly that we should not be wearing masks. So I can assure you that. So it's definitely that there's the word out there. His conversation back to me was that he would like to see more people in Berlin vaccinated. He feels our numbers aren't as high as others. I'm not so sure. As I said with you, typically it's not back and forth. I'm sharing you what was communicated from the health department. Whether you feel that it's correct or not, that was his recommendation back to me in an email. So it's not that your voices aren't being heard. I said that earlier. So thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to move on with our agenda this evening. Moving on to item 4, the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Motion by Mark. Do we have a second? By Carrie. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? 6-0. Okay, moving on to new business. So we have the Director of Finance, Ashley Dorsey. Do you want her to speak, or Brian, do you want to speak to the return balance of the 2020-21 fiscal year to the town's general fund?
You want to speak?
So in April, we began conversations with our transportation carrier, New Britain Transportation, to recover some costs associated with remote learning. And on the days where services, yeah, sure.
All right, Ashley, you can keep going. Thank you. Sorry about that.
So I'll just start over again. In April, we began conversations with our transportation carrier, New Britain Transportation, to recover some of the costs associated with remote learning where services were not provided. For the 17 remote learning days initiated by the Berlin Public Schools, we negotiated a percentage off of the daily rate to cover overhead expenses NBT factors into our contract rate. The board agreed to pay 62% of the daily rate for buses and 52% of the daily rate for small vehicles. Additionally, due to the pandemic, the number of hours to and from special education outplacement facilities was considerably less than in previous years. As part of the agreement, we proposed the board would not be fiscally responsible for services not provided to outplaced facilities, which resulted in a generous savings to the board. Since the majority of the savings stems from a reduction in special education expenditures, there may be an impact on the excess cost reimbursement for next year. Requests for the current year reimbursements cannot be revised, and adjustments to excess cost will be made in the next fiscal year. So as a result of this savings, I recommend, or I'm suggesting a $400,000 return to the town.
Do we have a motion?
I'll move that the unintended balance of the 2021 fiscal year budget in the amount of $400,000 be returned to the town of Berlin's general fund.
I'll second that motion.
All right, so the motion by Mark, the second by Stephen Weber. Any discussion on that? I mean, Jenkins, I apologize.
Okay.
Any discussion on this? Okay, we can move to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 6-0. Now I'm going to turn it over to the superintendent to discuss the reopening plan.
Sure. So each of you have a copy of the draft reopening plan. We are required to submit this draft to the state prior to our next meeting. It can be in draft form. So I'm asking you to take a look at the draft, to approve it as such, which we post on the website as a draft, and then we would then have the actual plan updated with anything that's changed prior to next meeting, and you would vote on the actual plan in the August meeting. So, and you can see there's contingencies, as was read earlier, you know, based on what the State Department of Public Health and the Central Connecticut Health District, based on their recommendations. As you go through, it's very similar. We didn't go through and decide at this point whether we're going to remove shields and not remove shields, because it is draft. We know it's going to change, and we really don't know what the state is going to release prior to that. So, but we do need a plan in place in order to be eligible for some of the grants.
So before we get into discussion, I need a motion.
Make a motion. I'll move to approve the 2021 reopening plan as presented by the superintendent.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
So the motion by Stephen Jenkins and the second by Stephen Weber. All right, now I'll open it up for the discussion.
I just have a question in Tim's absence.
Yes.
Because under item B, it does list it as the district reopening plan draft, but the motion doesn't include the word draft, should include the word draft.
This is definitely a draft. This is not.
Okay, so I just wonder if we
This
need
is
to
our
edit the
draft.
motion, just.
I mean, we had a clarification
acting
today
in Tim's
with,
absence.
you know, we had a clarification today with Tracy, who read through it. You know, one portion is parents really liked PPTs being done virtually, parent conferences for efficiency and so on. And, you know, it should have been cleaned up and said it's optional, either in person or, and it just said that it would be virtual. So there is going to be some cleanup across the board. But rather than go through something we know that's going to change based on whatever legislation's passed, we kind of took what we had and just updated it.
Should we change the motion?
I was going to say,
It should say draft.
if you don't
Okay,
mind,
so
given that comment, I'll amend the motion that I made to read, move to approve the 2021 draft reopening plan as presented. And I guess if we could have the second.
do we have a second? I'll second it. Thank you. So the motion made by Stephen Jenkins and the second made by Stephen Weber. Now we can reopen it back up for discussion.
I just have a question, if maybe the superintendent is best to answer, is if there's a time frame that you're aware of, that you expect certain dates, like decisions to be made, and how this draft will develop over the next, I guess, 6 weeks, really.
The first one is July 21st, with the governor's decision whether he's going to have the same powers he's had at that point. And then we're hoping that the CDC did release, prior to the board meeting on Friday, did release their guidelines, which are recommendations at this point. And they do make distinctions between the recommendations of those that are vaccinated and those that aren't vaccinated. But there's not clear requirements at this point. I think there'll be something from the state government on that within the next month, so that's our hope. There's been lengthy conversations with my superintendent groups, hoping for a universal decision across the state on things. So I would expect within the next 3 to 4 weeks we'll get more of an update, and this can become more concrete based on whatever's said. But the board will have the ultimate approval on that August meeting, so that would be when we would actually approve any of the changes to the plan. And what we'll do is when we make the changes, we'll highlight those prior to that in different colors so you can see what's changed. So what you have in front of you is really what the plan was, with some of the elimination of some of the requirements that were necessary last year.
Thank you. Yes.
I just had a question because you just brought it up and you and I spoke. If it comes out, because it says here, the decision may be based on grade level, as other students may be vaccinated, the older ones and the younger ones not. If it comes out the way it is now, vaccinated do not have to wear a mask, non-vaccinated are required to wear a mask, because I know you talked to the lawyers. Can they do that? Is that considered the discrimination to setting apart and labeling them because the children have the privacy laws? Like, have you found anything out, or will we know more then?
We'll know more about that day, because it's a question that's being asked across the state.
Okay.
They're not, we don't know if that would be a cause for discrimination if it was optional, right? But required mask for those that are not vaccinated and those that are not to wear masks. So I can't shed any more information on that this time. I don't know where the legal position is. Nope. But whatever's here, whatever's changes are made, the board will have the final say at that August meeting. So it's not as though we'll put it together. But
I have one additional question. If it stays as it is now, where the CDC guidelines, where vaccinated would not be required to wear a mask, both students and faculty, what obligations or responsibilities do we have to verify that? Is it the honor system, or do you have to have a staff robust enough to check vaccinations and keep lists? Do we have any guidance on what we have to do?
We wouldn't be able to check vaccinations. I don't think that they would allow that. But that's another question.
I raise it
Yep. Nope.
to be prepared, and we're not going to have a lot of time to pivot.
No, we'll have the answers, because, as I met with last week, every other Tuesday, I meet with a group of 26 superintendents. This is a discussion over 45 minutes, and they're really waiting for legal guidance on that, those questions, because every district's facing the same thing we're facing. But it's a good question, because I think that in many large events, in order to enter those large events, they're asking people to show their vaccination card. So, but I can't. Personally, I don't see that being the case, because much of it's been on honor so far. But I don't want to speculate by saying that.
And I've seen it where if it's presumed you're not vaccinated, and if you don't want to wear the mask, you have to show your ID. That's why I raise it, so that you're prepared, because it is a task to try to track that.
Any other comments from anyone else? Okay, so we are going to go ahead and vote on the draft 2021 reopening plan as presented. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Anyone not vote? Okay, 6-0. And we will be reviewing this at our August meeting and finalizing it, and it will come back to the board. Okay, moving on to policy. Do you want to talk about the policy, or would you like me to?
Either one can speak to it. I mean, you want to talk about the second reading here first?
Yep.
Okay, the second reading, both of these policies, it's a second reading. Both of them deal with our Title IX and our prohibition of sex discrimination and sexual harassment. This were new policies across the state. They were federal policies, and then from the state. The need for these policies is that the overall investigation reporting has changed greatly, where it would be one individual, it's now 3. There's a definitive timeline to investigate. There's specific investigation that must take place. There's the information that needs to be processed is scrutinized by a multitude of people, not just an individual. There is thought that this could be changing at the state and federal level, but as for right now, we needed to update our policy, as most districts have had to do. And speaking to our attorneys, many districts are just doing it now also, even though it came in last year. So.
All right, do we have a motion for consideration?
I'll move that the board adopt revised policy 5145.5, prohibition of sex discrimination and sexual harassment students, and revised policy 4118.112, prohibition of sex discrimination and sexual harassment in the workplace personnel, as presented.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
So the motion by Carrie, the second by Mark Prusen. Any discussion about the policies? Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Vote is 6-0. Moving on to, okay. So we have the first reading of new policy 7551, naming of facility, new construction, as well as new policy 1881, naming / renaming of school buildings, components of buildings, and/or school grounds.
Sure. In our previous policy book, when the policy book was updated, this is before my time, superintendent, the policy for naming of buildings, there was a policy in our handbook. When the policy book got updated, that policy did not translate over. So we asked for 2 model policies that were attached from our attorneys. Those were reviewed today in an ad hoc committee, and the group decided there needs to be some work on those policies to make them more unique to Berlin. Taking a look at not just naming, whether it be an auditorium or a building or a baseball field, but how they're named. If they're not named for an individual, how that takes place. But we really needed some framework of how a naming takes place and a process to go through. So when you look at whether it's the policies we just approved, second reading on sex discrimination, really these policies help us to ensure that there's a way of thinking about what's taking place in a consistent manner that takes place for everyone, and that whether it's naming of a facility, new construction, or it's renaming of a building, that it goes through an appropriate process where people have input and it's consistent for anyone who wants something named. So those 2, we're going to look at the first reading. The construct that's there would stay in place, but we would be looking to add a little different verbiage to them and then bring them back to the ad hoc committee prior to the next board meeting.
Thank you, Brian. We're moving on to policy 5141.4, reports of suspected abuse and/or sexual assault response policy and reporting procedures. So, do you want to talk to this a little bit?
Yeah, that goes with the DCF policy, and it goes to our Title IX. So if it's one that needs to be updated because our current policy doesn't meet the state and federal guidelines. So.
Great, thank you. So, moving on to the next agenda item, block scheduling update and information. So I'm going to turn it over to Principal of Berlin High School, Eileen Eusis. Good evening.
I have a PowerPoint, so I don't know if you want to take a look at that. So thank you for having me tonight. I understand that there are some questions that came up with regard to moving to the 90-minute block schedule that we had in place this past year. So I was able to put some information together. So I guess one of the things I also wanted to make a mention of is instead of just reverting back to our old schedule, I would say after we were a few months into the block schedule this past year, which we moved to because of the pandemic, I actually was receiving unsolicited comments about people that actually liked the schedule, the benefits of the schedule, and that was coming from faculty members as well as students. So just in terms of trying to take a look at this and making a decision, these are the things that we wanted to make sure that we had in place in terms of considerations for a schedule. So obviously you want a schedule that's effective for teaching and learning. It maximizes scheduling of student requests as well as use of staffing. It allows for common planning time for teachers. It also allows for our advisory program. It has a positive impact on social emotional wellness for students. And obviously, given the fact when we were taking a look at the schedule, we were still, this was back late winter, early spring, when things were still a lot tighter when it came to the pandemic. So we still wanted something that if we had to continue with certain health and safety protocols, that we would be able to continue to do so. And you can see some of the things that impact that. So just very quickly, the schedule on the left is the schedule that we had been on prior to the 2021 school year. So it was a 4-day rotation, and it had 6 class periods a day. The class periods were 60 minutes in length. And as you can see, that middle period, we were able to have 3 lunch waves. And that last one on the end allows, that's our advisory schedule, so you can see the times are adjusted a little bit. You'll also notice there's a little bit of a rotation of periods in the day, particularly in the middle of that there was some thought to the fact like they like to see, you know, that they didn't necessarily like to have the periods at the same time every single day. If you go to the schedule that we put in place last year, the 90-minute block schedule, you can see that it's 4 periods per day. You can see the lunch wave period allows us to have 4 lunch waves. Which actually helps us in a lot of different ways. And then you can also see with the advisory schedule that we still have periods that are of a reasonable length, and the same thing also happens when we have an early dismissal. Even on an early dismissal day, when we stick with the block schedule, classes are close to an hour. So they actually, teachers are able to get a lot done even on an early dismissal day. So I just wanted to also let you know the process that we used in terms of feedback. As I was saying, I was starting to get some unsolicited feedback, so just to sort of tighten things up and hear from a variety of different groups. One of the things I did in January was offer an opportunity to meet with seniors one-on-one. There were about 40+ seniors that took advantage of that opportunity, and I did take the opportunity to ask them about the 90-minute block schedule. Again, there was a lot of positive feedback. They felt like it was really good preparation for their next step beyond high school. I had a parent coffee in January in which I offered an opportunity for parents to provide feedback. There were at least, I believe there were about 35 different parents that were on that parent coffee. It was a virtual meeting, which was actually the virtual ones. I was able to get more parents had an opportunity to attend when I held those virtually, which was actually really nice. So we also then moved forward with faculty and student surveys in February, department leader discussions in March, discussion with central office staff with the assistant superintendent as well as the superintendent in March. We also, year-round, were able to do a variety of different classroom observations, and then again, that anecdotal feedback that we were getting throughout the year. So just to have you take a look at the survey feedback itself. So on the student survey, we got over 200 responses from students, which is pretty good for a student response. And the nice thing about that, you can see the breakdown was relatively even across grade level. So it wasn't entirely skewed towards upperclassmen and underclassmen. So it was great to hear from a variety of students. So the first question was, which best defines your feelings about the 90-minute schedule? And you can see that 80% of the students did say that it meets my needs most of the time. I understand the material better because of the increase in instructional time for each class. And you can see the breakdown in terms of there are a smaller, it's about 25, a little over 25%, 26% In the disagree or strongly disagree, we have 29% in neutral, and then the rest were in the agree or strongly agree. Next question is, I feel less stressed and anxious because of the block schedule. Again, in the agree and strongly agree, you have over 48%. You have 25% in the neutral, and then the other in the, again, a smaller percentage of students in the disagree or strongly disagree. I'm able to manage my schoolwork better because of the block schedule. This was one that obviously very much stood out to me, that it was a very high percentage of students that said that they agree or strongly agree that they're able to manage their own workload better. So I also then asked them for the benefits, and I also required them to provide a challenge, because if there are challenges, we want to work towards how do we meet those challenges by moving to a block schedule. So the students themselves offered these things for the benefits, that they had more time to get work done in class and at home. They had fewer classes in a day, which allowed them to focus on, instead of 6 classes, 4 classes per day, and that also impacted the type of preparation they were able to do in the evening. The extra night for homework was beneficial for students. Teachers can take more time with lessons, more time to ask questions and get help. That was a lot. There were many students that actually commented on that. Again, the students also talked quite a bit about being able to pace their own workload. The schedule was less chaotic with the odd even and the fact that there was no rotation midday. So sometimes the kids will come in and it's like, what day is it? What's the order of the periods? So it was a little bit easier with the odd even. And then fewer classes, less work due each day feels less stressful. And again, those were comments that came directly from students. They were asked to put challenges in as well. This was a required question for all of them. So they did talk about the fact that the period's too long, not enough breaks during class, easily distracted or less focused due to length of class, and a long time in one setting, sitting or being on screen. So obviously moving forward, you eliminate that excessive screen time is our hope. And also the fact that they were like sitting and not able to get up and move around quite as much because of some of our restrictions, we'll be able to mitigate that. In terms of too long, the students will say 90 minutes is a long time, but if the teacher breaks up the period, then it's actually much more doable for them. So again, that's a little bit of work that we would want to do with our faculty and staff that in terms of how they use that time. But the majority of teachers did a very nice job breaking the class periods up. And just some other comments, students would love to have a longer lunch. They did mention that they would need more breaks. Many students said keep it, and then there were some students, a smaller number of students that said they don't like it. So again, just to let you know what some of the comments were. So if we move on to the teacher feedback, we had 68 responses from teachers. You can just see there's a wide variety of breakdown from the various departments. Some of the larger departments obviously have a greater percentage of return there. Their feedback in terms of same questions, what best defines your feelings about the 90-minute block schedule, meets my needs most of the time. You can see a very high percentage, close to 78%. And then we asked them to rate effectiveness of, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being least effective, 5 being most effective, and you can see that it definitely skews towards the higher end of being more effective in terms of teaching and learning. We asked them, what do you like best, or what were the benefits? They were able to do more and to get through everything. Even with a 60-minute period, strangely enough, it goes very quickly. So you can think about in a math class, you use a lot of time going over homework, and then you feel very rushed to get your actual lesson in, and it kind of creates a reverse cycle. And that can happen in a number of different classes. They felt as though they had more time to go in depth. There was actually more time for community building and connecting with students. They like the longer periods because not only at the beginning and the end, they actually can take a break in the middle for several minutes and engage with students and have conversations, get to know them. They would take walks around the building. They would go outside for a few minutes and then come back in. And there was a lot of benefit to that in terms of building relationships. They felt less rushed. There were fewer contacts throughout the day, which again was important from just a health and safety standpoint. There was time for cleaning and tech. There was more flexibility in lesson design and delivery. Gone are the days really where our students, they're not going to sit and just receive information all the time. It can't be that stand and deliver, whether it's a 60-minute or a 90-minute. And so the nice thing about the 90-minute class is it offers that flexibility to do more creative things, more group work, go more in depth, spend more time on more sustained time on a writing assignment. Actually more flexibility to do a lab or a project because now you don't have to wait for that particular long period in the cycle. Again, able to take breaks, more time to work with students and answer questions. So they actually love the fact that there would be some time towards the end of the period to allow students to get started on homework, particularly those classes where it's that sustained homework that you need like every day. And what was nice is they liked being right there to answer questions right off the bat for students, and that was positive feedback from the students as well. And for some of our teachers, they can focus on fewer preps each day. We do have a number of teachers that have as many as 4 or 5 different classes that they teach, and because of the way that the schedule breaks down, they can focus their prep a little bit differently because they wouldn't be teaching more than 3 classes in a day, so that would be 3 preps on one day and maybe 2 on another. And that really helped with just planning and focus for that. What were some of their challenges? Too long in one sitting, one setting, sitting online. Again, some of those things will be mitigated as we no longer will be in the hybrid or remote mode. Hard to keep students engaged. So again, for those that commented on that, it's just a matter of we need to work with those teachers in terms of some of those instructional practices. Lack of continuity with the every other day creates too much of a gap or need to see them every day. This actually I checked back with some of the departments that said they were struggling with this, and once we brought students back full time, they actually said the fact that they see them every other day, that continuity was there. The difficulty that they were having is, don't forget, we were doing this every other day, and then it was remote one week, in person the next, so it felt very broken up. But once the students came back, they felt as though that was, that really concern went away. Back-to-back study halls and science class labs. So this past year, there were some science classes that were back-to-back, so 3 hours in a science class is great sometimes, but we actually, moving forward with planning the schedule this year, we were able to mitigate that, and we don't have that repetition. And the challenge to create longer lessons, curriculum would need shifting. So we did provide some curriculum writing time for anybody that needed to make any of those curriculum shifts for this summer. But many of them were actually making those changes as the school year went on last year. And then just some of their other comments, we had many teachers that were like it, love it, keep it. The few that really don't like it, it was definitely like, I hate it. We get that. We knew not everybody was going to love it. Some did feel like 60 minutes worked. They would like to experience the block during a normal year, so we'll be able to hopefully do that this coming school year as we look to mitigate things. And they like the consistency of the odd even. So keeping all of that in mind, again, with the feedback that was received in the other forums, we looked long and hard at reasons for continuing this, and there's a couple that I specifically highlighted that I just really felt like tipped us in the right direction. There was positive feedback from students as well as staff members in regards to the effectiveness of teaching and learning, and for students in particular managing their workload. The increased time for community building and strengthening student relationships. We all know the best learning comes when you have a strong relationship with your teacher. And believe it or not, those extra minutes in class, they're not wasted. They're not wasted at all. That community building allowed teachers to get further with learning and curriculum with their students because they had time to get to know them more. It wasn't always this like, let's go, 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 go. The ability to go more in depth and cover more material. It allowed for increased flexibility in lesson design and delivery, particularly for our project-based type of classes, project and performance-based type classes. The flexibility of lab, performance, and project-based classes, you have more options to do that. The increased consistency for the odd-even format, ability for students to manage their workload outside of school. That really came out loud and clear from students. We have a very involved student population. They play sports, they're in multiple activities, and this really allowed them to manage their time outside of school as well. Increased time to provide academic support during class, and I felt like that was another huge piece for all of our students. For our students particularly that just need that time with the teacher to ask questions or that confidence boost or that builder, that time is able to happen there. Fewer transitions during the day for students, the ability to add a fourth lunch wave is big for us. Right now we jam about 300 students into the cafeteria. It's a lovely space, but it gets tight when you put that many kids in there. By adding a fourth lunch wave, we can actually decrease that to about 240, 235, and that actually helps quite a bit. The ability to support potential future COVID or other health protocols would be really helpful, and the increased ability to support future program related to interdisciplinary or career development. So things such as, if we're looking to build internships and further work opportunities, you now have a larger block of time where students could, provided they have transportation, they can leave and they can actually come back and they don't have to miss other classes. If they're out early because they have a study hall at the end of the day or that's when their internship or, job program is scheduled, it actually provides a larger chunk of time for them. So it helps in that way as well. So those were, I just wanted to give you all some information as to why we decided to go ahead and continue with the block schedule for next year. We really felt as though, particularly the personal connections, the stress, the students expressing the fact that they did feel like less stress, really merited us continuing with the schedule moving forward. We do recognize it's a big shift for students coming into 9th grade because they're coming from 45-minute classes, so that is definitely something we're working with our 9th grade teachers on, just to make sure that they actually are working with our 9th grade students right off the bat in terms of getting used to a longer class period. So, any questions?
Very detailed. Thank you for that.
Okay, sorry.
Very much, yeah, thank you so much. It was very informative, and it answered a lot of questions. Thank you, thank you.
Okay,
And I just would have to reiterate that again because it is so important. It was very interesting. You got all the feedback and all the perspectives and put it together. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think the final point I would just want to make is that it really came because of people providing that feedback early on to say, hey, we really like this. Is there an opportunity for us to continue with this? So I'm glad we had a chance to look into it. So, okay, thank you.
All right, great, thank you. Moving on to the Equity and Social Justice Committee report. So Dr. McGurk is going to present an overview of the work that has been getting done.
Thanks for being patient while I get some technical support here. So I've been asked this evening to give an overview of the work that we've been doing in equity in the Berlin Public Schools. And I'm going to do this in the context of the way that this work has developed over the past 3 years. So in 2016, the state of Connecticut created their 5-year plan. So every 5 years for the last probably at least 20 years, the state of Connecticut develops a comprehensive plan and sets out priorities that are meant to help guide the work of districts across the state. So one thing I wanted to let you know is that the work that we're doing here in Berlin is very much aligned with that. So getting started in 2018, 2019, for each of the years, I'm just going to highlight some of the work that was done so that you have a sense of the way that this has unfolded. So in 2018, in the fall, the board adopted a district continuous improvement plan, which included the strategy, provide training for district leaders, administrators, teacher leaders, and students related to equity issues in education. That year in the fall, 42 teachers and administrators participated in a voluntary district book club. You'll see that's a theme that continues for us because we have many voluntary district book clubs. We had 15 educators and approximately 10 students participate in the Connecticut State Department of Ed and the State Education Resource Center sponsored conference, Dismantling Systemic Racism. And one of the things that, the feedback that we got from that was that it was very powerful for educators and students to be learning side by side from some nationally recognized experts, that was something, that notion of having our students learn with us and for us to listen to student voice and have a chance to hear their experiences is very important. All certified staff that year participated in training on gender in the classroom, and we had 6 educators participate in equity-focused summer training, which included our first sort of district-level introduction to the social justice standards. So the social justice standards, if you're not familiar with them, were published through an organization called Teaching Tolerance that's now called Learning for Justice, and they have 4 main goals around anti-bias work. One that's around identity, that each student will demonstrate self-awareness, confidence, family pride, and positive social identities, that each child will express comfort and joy with human diversity, accurate language for human differences, and deep, caring human connections, that each child will increasingly recognize unfairness, have language to describe unfairness, and understand that unfairness hurts, and that each child will demonstrate empowerment and the skills to act with others or alone against prejudice and discriminatory actions. And what we saw after that training was that our teachers came back and some of them started to infuse that into the work that they were doing with our students starting at the beginning of the 2019 school year. So in the 2019 school year, the Board of Education adopted a continuous improvement plan, which included the strategy, establish an equity advocates team to lead district work in social justice and anti-racist educational practices. We sent out a call to all of our certified staff members, and we thought at the time that we might have 8 or 10 or maybe 12 teachers that stepped forward to say that they wanted to be part of that work. We actually had 41 teachers and administrators elect to participate in the Equity Advocates team. They also were introduced to the social justice standards, and we looked at topics across the year, including unconscious bias, avoiding equity detours, and thinking about what it means to be anti-racist. You see some of the books highlighted, The Troublemakers, Not Light But Fire, and How to Be an Anti-Racist, were 3 of the books that were made available to teachers that were part of the Equity Advocates team. That year, we also had 34 teachers participate in training on productively addressing hurtful, biased comments or actions in elementary school. And the reason that it's just at elementary school is that we scheduled that training in March of 2020. We held the first day of training, and we had 34 teachers participate in the first couple of days of the training, and we were scheduled next to do it at McGee, and that's when school shut down for this school year. So our work that year was definitely curtailed by the changing focus with the pandemic. And we also had 27 teachers and administrators participate in a district book club on the book We Got This by Cornelius Minor. As we built out the work this year, the Board of Education adopted a district continuous improvement plan, which included the strategy, expand district work in social justice and anti-racist educational practices, including development of a district plan to address equity issues. This fall, in the throes of coming back to school, I wasn't sure about doing a district book club, to be honest with you. It seemed like a very stressful time with teachers managing the hybrid schedules and getting used to all of the different things that were changes. And I actually had a teacher reach out to me and say, hey, aren't you going to do a district book club this fall? And we had 31 teachers and administrators participate in a voluntary district book club on CAST that we held over Zoom because of the protocols, it was easier for us to get teachers together, and we ran 2 sessions of the book club on several weeks in a row to give people a chance to discuss that. One of the things that's different in 2020, 2021 was that we started to build out the work by involving more and more teachers in the work. So you saw, as I highlighted in some of the other pages, that we had volunteers and people that were choosing to be part of it. This year we started to push more effectively into having it be work that was affecting the lives and the work of all of our teachers. And BHS led the way with this in terms of launching building-wide training. They did work with CREC very closely and held an anti-bias workshop series. So they used time on district professional development days to give all teachers at the high school the opportunity to learn and participate in those sessions. We had the BHS leadership team participate in the CREC Leadership for Equity Institute. We had 6 BHS educators and 22 students participate virtually in the Dismantling Systemic Racism workshop. We had Griswold teachers and administrators participate in the Anti-Racist Educator Framework Institute, and the district launched the Equity and Social Justice Advisory Committee. So in fall 2020, the Board of Ed ad hoc committee created a charge for the committee. And to be frank, one of the things that's unusual about this is that while the board was involved in sort of getting the work launched, this has not functioned strictly as a board committee. It really has had some board representation, but it's really been a much broader committee. Again, when we sent out the notice, we weren't sure what we would get in terms of participation. We ended up having 68 individuals asked to be part of the work. That included Board of Education members, educators, students, parents, and community members. And we made the decision early on not to exclude anyone who wanted to be part of the work. So, you know, with all the challenges of the pandemic, one of the things that worked well for us was that we were able to have large-scale meetings over Zoom, and so that the people who wanted to participate could be part of the group. As the spring went on, we found that some people just didn't like Zoom meetings. Some people started in the committee and decided it wasn't really for them. Some people had other conflicts. But we've averaged having 35 to 45 participants, and 42 of the original 68 committee members signed on to participate in subcommittees. This year, we really chose to focus on shared learning opportunities. We thought that it was very important that if the committee members were going to make recommendations that might change practice or policy in the school district, that they were making those decisions based on some common learning and some common understanding. We focused on topics including looking at our district data on discipline, implicit bias, the difference between bias and racism, on microaggressions, on disrupting microaggressions, on systems and laws that have supported segregation and race and ethnicity-based oppression, and the wheel of power and privilege. We started meeting in January and had meetings January, February, and March. In April, we launched our subcommittee meetings and had several subcommittee meetings during the school year. The subcommittees that we've put in place are our curriculum audit and anti-bias, anti-racist efforts with students. That's led by Pam Hamid and Lori Jerpin. A parent, family, community outreach group that's led by Tim Cheverini, Sarah Patel, and Kevin Wilhelm. A professional learning for educators and other members of the school staff that's led by Dave Basso and Kara Quinn. A recruitment and retention of a diverse workforce that's led by Cindy Martin and Tyler Boyle, and a school culture and student opportunities group that's led by Dave Kitzman and Katie Amenta. I know several of them are here tonight, and I just want to thank the people who stepped up to help lead the subcommittees. It's very important when we're trying to have a group that size be actively involved in moving things forward, that we have strong leadership, and I'm certainly very grateful for the people that stepped up to do that. So as we look ahead for next steps, there are several things that we need to do. One is to review the feedback on the current committee structure and to review the feedback from participants. I will tell you that we took feedback after most of the sessions, and at the end of the spring, we did a larger scale message out to the committee asking for feedback. I will tell you that we have people tell us that we weren't moving fast enough, and people who learned that even with adults that want to get together and discuss difficult topics, that adults don't always agree on how the topic should be addressed. And it's a new learning experience for many people to come together and talk about difficult issues such as race, bias, discrimination, and certainly that has been evident in the feedback from participants. Many people expressed feedback telling us that they were grateful for the opportunity, that they were learning a lot, that they were learning from other people in the sessions, and they valued the opportunity to speak with each other. We also had feedback that said some people dominated the discussion, some people talked over other people in the group. So some of the same kinds of things that we see sometimes in learning experiences with students, we saw with some of our adults in the groups. We need to consider the format and the structure of the meetings. So one consideration is moving from Zoom to live sessions. I think that Eileen pointed out that with the parent coffees that they liked having you got more people. Brian said earlier that when we looked at parent conferences and things like 504 meetings and PPTs, that we've had many people tell us that worked effectively for them. But we also have had other people say they want to be in the room face to face, they want to get to know the people that are serving on the committee. So that's something that we have to balance out. We have to review and respond to certified staff responses. We did a survey at the end of June with questions that were generated by several of the subcommittees. So we have that feedback now, and the subcommittees need time to go through that and generate next steps and ideas coming from that. We need to determine a pathway for new individuals to enter this work. So one of the things that happened last spring was that after the first couple of meetings, I had people approach me and say, this is great, I didn't know about it, could I join in now? And honestly, with 68 people signed up at that point, we weren't really looking to add more people right then, but we do want to make sure that if people are interested in this work moving forward, that we have an opportunity for them to join in. We need to continue to develop the key next steps and strategies for each of the subcommittee meetings, each of the subcommittees. So at the end of the year, I would say the subcommittees were just getting started, but hadn't moved very far yet in terms of actual action steps, and never mind to a point where we're ready to create a larger draft plan and have something together for you to review. So I anticipate that will be happening in the fall. And we also have people that need to draft and publish a district equity statement. Some of the feedback that I've gotten has been that there are members in the subcommittee, in the committees, that are disappointed that the board and the district has not yet made a stronger statement about equity and about this work, and they're looking for that moving forward. So those are our projected next steps. I will tell you that this is work that is unfolding as as we're going through it. We're learning more about what's working and not working, and we've had to make some adjustments along the way. But I'm pleased with where we are right now as a district, and I look forward to continuing to work on this moving forward.
So I have a question before I open it up to the board for questions. I know that there was, we discussed the meetings and it being a subcommittee of the board, and then you had mentioned that it wasn't a subcommittee of the board. So I think we need, as a board, clarity on that, especially for the community, because people in the community were asking.
I would say that it doesn't function the way that your other subcommittees, your other board committees function. So in your other, when you have the curriculum committee, it is a board, it's primarily board members that sit on the committee with other people who come to the meeting periodically to present information, but it's the board that's functioning. When you have your F&O committee, it's your board members in the room for the F&O committee. When you have your communications committee.
But wasn't it the way the charge was made by the Board of Education when Rich Arroyo was president? Because I know we had discussion around that, and I know you spoke with our board attorney.
Honestly, Julie, it's been.
When we have the other board committees, there's a board member who is the leading the committee, right? There's a person appointed. This committee, there was not a board member appointed to it. It was just members put on the committee. But the charge was that we would form a committee. That was the charge from the former board chair, that he wanted a committee to look at social justice, and equity. So that was his charge, that he felt that was a piece that was missing. So I'm not sure if it was said it's going to be a committee, but his charge was that would be looked at. So how the committee structure formed, it wasn't as though it was a charge to me as the superintendent. So in speaking to the legal advice, the attorney said, well, if it's charged to you by the board, then it's a board committee. But it's not functioning in the same capacity as the other committees, because there's not a board member who's chairing it. It's being chaired by, Aaron, and then myself in the background.
So then what do we need to do as a board to fix that? Because the way it was charged, it gives the conception that, like, it's a subcommittee of the board. So I just think we need to clear that up, because
I just think we got to decide, or the board can decide now, how they want it structured. The bigger piece is if it's not being done by Zoom and it's an open meeting, I know the discussion was that the meetings needed to be open to the public, whoever would like to be there, if it is a board committee. But there's many committees that run through the district. If it's a curriculum committee, it's not necessarily open to the public, it's just a curriculum committee with educators. So, if the board wants it to be a board committee, then that's not a problem. We just have to have, I think, a different structure in place. And should there be a board member or is the board charging me as the person, or charging Aaron, or me to charge Aaron as the person that's leading it?
Bryant, it also has implications for the bylaws of the board, because this is a subcommittee that's in the bylaws. So when you did the committee revision last year.
It's not in the bylaws.
It's not in the bylaws.
No, it had to be an ad hoc, which, just like we did today, we had an ad hoc for the policies. And that's how we do our policy update.
does anyone on the board want to share to the point that I brought up about it being just a committee within district or a subcommittee of the Board of Education?
I had a comment that I was prepared to make tonight, and I guess it kind of parallels your thoughts that
Okay.
you've articulated. I, as a board member and sitting on one of the committees, got a little bit lost as to how things were going to be moving and developing, and being on a committee as a volunteer, but also being on the Board of Ed, I really couldn't connect the two. And then when I looked down the list of the committee names, we have similar board committees, and I didn't see how they were relating to each other and then filtering recommendations to the board, if that was what was supposed to be happening. So for example, I chose to join the curriculum committee on this committee because I was on the curriculum committee on the board. So I wanted continuity in what I was focusing on. But we also have a parent, family, community outreach committee that seems to parallel what our communications committee is doing. And then the three other committees, the school culture and student opportunities committee, I don't know where that would fit in to what the board has for existing committees and where the recommendations would go and how the board would act on them. And then the other two committees, the professional learning and educators and other members and school staff, and the recruitment and retention and diverse workforce, that one in particular, that has such a legal structure around it that your HR professional and your outside advisors need to be involved. And my question was, having it run parallel, if that's the way it is running, parallel to the board, and the board's not informed, are we setting ourselves up for false expectations, mixed expectations, or a misunderstanding because we really don't know what's transpired and developed, especially when we get into those things about retention and recruitment and how to do that, because those do have significant parameters that have to be followed. So those were some of my comments. I wasn't aware of how it was charged and how it was formed, but participating on it, I just didn't know how, and it seems, Julie, you've articulated what I've observed over the last couple months, is how does it get filtered and how does it move into action at the Board of Ed level?
Well, I don't think there was that great a clarity when it was decided to be charged. It was just, we needed equity and social justice committee, and you need to make that happen. It wasn't as though it was, when the work was relevant to one of the committees, then it should come through. If there's a curriculum change that's taking place, that would normally go through the curriculum committee, obviously, then this should go through it. But I don't think there was a direct alignment, Steve, in that manner. I don't know, those that were on the board back then, I don't think that was the.
I guess I'm still just trying to clarity around what our attorney said, because I know some people here, we've received calls, they're here tonight, about the minutes around this committee, and it's a charge of the board versus it's on a subcommittee of the board, and I feel like we're going back and forth. And I think just tonight, on the record, we need to clarify it and all be on the same
The only
page.
clarity is that if we're going to hold the meetings, if we're gonna hold the meetings virtually, then the public has to have access to them. If we hold them in person, then the public has access to the meeting to come in person, just like any of our other committee meetings that we have. They're posted, they're done, if it is indeed a board committee. So the question really, Bo, is it a board committee that's charged? Now, speaking to when I spoke to the attorney about the board chair said they wanted this committee, the position by the attorney was that it becomes a board committee if the board is charging you to do it. So in that case, therefore, there'd have to be the minutes, as we would do with any of our subcommittees, and it'd have to have access to the public. Those are the only two pieces, because under the FOI, it's FOIable.
And that's when Rich Arroyan was chair, that's how he charged it,
Julia,
correct?
would you be all right if I just interjected? The way that this is working in many districts, this varies in districts across the state. So in some districts, their equity and social justice work lives essentially outside of the schools, and it's been a community group that has been up and running, sometimes with members of the school community, serving as part of that larger community. And in some districts, it's an internal district committee that is separate from the Board of Education, but that periodically updates and reviews information with the Board of Education.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. I think it's just how it was charged and how it was done. We need to make sure we're following the appropriate
Yes,
way.
in my read of the minutes, the board formed an ad hoc committee to develop the charge for the committee, but did not ever take action to formulate a committee. So it has been a little murky. I agree with that.
Right, it's been murky because it just was the initial statement. It wasn't that there was any clear guidelines, it wasn't any clear goals. It was basically, we need an ad hoc committee. A lot of the work that was being done internally already has been outlined tonight.
Right.
But the next step was, because there were pieces in the community that transpired that year before, the thought was we need a committee that is greater than just what's in the school, hence involving the public, which was a committee that involved the public, which is what this committee does.
So I have a question that for me kind of, I don't know, a number of the questions that are being posed here or discussed kind of hinge upon, and that is the function of this. Is it to serve more as a task force where there are a series of, a set of goals or objectives? When reached, the task force is disassembled, I guess, or is it something that should take the form of a committee that has some degree of permanence associated? So that's, I think, a question that needs to be.
I think it's definitely a task force. I don't think it's I think it's an ongoing committee as long as it's needed.
Right.
I think there was an issue that surfaced that year that we were working on within the district, but the thought was at the time that there wasn't a presence of the community to understand what we've been working on and to have input and feedback, from the group. And that's really what this committee structure was, to get those members in the community that felt strong. And that's why, when Aaron said it was open to all, to join the committee, to understand the structure that's going on, and then to look at those 5 areas of where they could have an impact and give people an area to focus on. So it wasn't meant to be this ongoing committee forever. I thought it was more of a task force to look at our curriculum and to really take a look at some of the criticism that was given to it, as we're all aware of, and to see, is it really relevant? As one of the person who gave the greatest criticism, wasn't in the district for a lot of it, and many pieces of the curriculum were no longer part of the curriculum. But it doesn't mean that we don't take the filter and look at the rest of it to see if there are biased and things that need to be changed. So that was my initial thought, but I don't want to speak and say that there was this lengthy conversation with the former chair about, or with the board about how it should be structured, what it should be done. It just was form the committee. And so that's what we did.
So I think as a Board of Ed, we need to figure out specifically, is this a subcommittee of the board or is this a task force? And then on our next agenda, we need clear, is that correct, Brian? We need something more, like we need clarity around what this is, so we can make sure we have the appropriate minutes if we need minutes, if it's a task force and we don't.
Right, and I can speak to our attorneys about what the structure should be. I think it's more, what does the board want the structure to be? Do you view it at this point? Because it's really moving forward. That was something done with the former chair, many new members on the board. Is it a task force? Do you view it as an ongoing committee? Do you want it to be a board committee? Do you want it to be, I think those are pieces that I need those guidelines, from you, and then I can take those forward to the attorney to see, what the requirements would be. But I do know from speaking to the attorney directly that if they are live meetings, the public, yes, there needs to be minutes, but the public's invited, and that's the part. It's not an exclusive meeting. That's only those that are invited. That it can't be.
Does anyone on the board want to add?
I just have a question. So I don't know the whole legalities of live, not live, and all that stuff. But my question is, I thought the task force, this committee was being formed, and I thought it was in correlation with looking at what we have, what we're doing, what we've been doing, and ways change, or how we can change, whether it's curriculum, teaching students different ways, or teachers' ways and stuff like that, because this is where it was impacted. If that's the case and there's goals to change, whether it's curriculum, teaching and whatnot, doesn't that involve the Board of Ed? Because we're the ones that would vote initially, if a new textbook or something's coming out. Plus, if that's the case, if there is a goal that is looking at our, let's say curriculum right now, let's say that's one of the goals, looking at what we have in curriculum and where we want to go from this and what we'd want to adapt, wouldn't then like we do our committee report, then wouldn't it be beneficial to have someone from that task force committee, whatever it is, say this is what we've been talking about, or this is what's going on, instead of whenever those goals are reached and whatever those goals are, all of a sudden it's now on us, because I think a lot of us have no idea what's happening and we're just hearing things.
If you do it as an ad hoc, that's exactly what the ad hoc would report, just like your communications committee,
Right.
just like they would report. That's why the other way is to have it done outside of it, and then it would come through those committees when it's relevant. So if there's something that they believe should be communication, that should hit the communications committee, it will come through it. If there's something that should be in curriculum, it would go through the curriculum committee. For adopting new textbooks, regardless of whether it comes out of this committee or not, it's going to have to go to the curriculum committee because that's our policy. So it's just a matter of how you want the information, and whether it's something you feel should report it on at every board meeting, or whenever there's like a subcommittee, an ad hoc subcommittee, or it's something that should be worked on, and you're going to hear about it when you hear Aaron report on the summer curriculum work. You're going to hear what was done in summer curriculum work. If there's a textbook that's adopted, you're going to hear about it in curriculum committee, because the textbook being adopted. So it's just a matter of how you want it structured, and it can go either way.
I think to add on to that, though, it's what action authority do the committees have? And for example, let's take a simple community outreach. Is this committee going to be doing things on behalf of the schools that isn't filtered through our three members on our, this is the most simple and basic one, our community outreach team, where they go and meet and then come back and make recommendations to the board. So what action authority do they have? And are they going to be taking action by themselves and they go and do it whatever they decide? Or is it a recommendation to the board? And in some certain cases, like community outreach and so forth, I really think it needs to be paralleled with our community and outreach committee. So we have a universal approach. That's the most simple one. But you look at these committees and you can kind of see where they line up and where there's actually no lining up, no alignment.
Well, I think there would be reports on them and move forward. But I think when we talk about, we had an equity advocate group that was in place long before we had this committee that was doing work within the schools. So it's not as though this just came about. But the real message was, with the former chair, was Now it's time to get the community involved. They need to be involved, and that's where this committee came about. So I don't think that there's, and that's the question too, I don't think there's things happening that would be, and I guess it'd be my job to say, this is going against where things are going, or this should go to the communications committee, or this shouldn't, go to the communications committee.
And I think you're kind of making my point and some of the other board members confusing as to what you can't tell me now what a committee's doing and what the output is and where it's supposed to go when they get output. That's what we're talking about right now, is you can't tell us how that's gonna work.
So I think right now, we need to make sure we have this on next month's agenda as a motion for it to be a subcommittee of the Board of Education, and then if people want to vote against it or we have greater discussion, I think that's the place to do so, because I think people need to take this in, think about it, come up with some questions, and then we'll have a purposeful discussion. But I think we need, I know we need more clarity around this and what this committee is. We just need to be specific. And I think that was the intent, but if the intent was to involve the community and it's open to the community, then we need to make sure that we are charging it appropriately. Any other comments about that? So more to come on in our August meeting. We normally don't call on people. Could you? Okay, thank you. Yeah, just email me. Thank you. Sorry about that. Moving on to anything else before we wrap up this whole conversation. Dr. McGurk, thank you for your presentation. I know we got caught up on the charge, but I think, people have a lot of questions around that. So moving on to textbook adoption. So I will turn it back over to Dr. McGurk.
Yes, early this evening, the curriculum committee met and reviewed a textbook adoption proposal for a book called One for the Murphys for a 6th grade English language arts textbook. So you have a motion to approve the textbook adoption.
All right, do we have a motion?
I'll move to adopt the textbook One for the Murphys by Linda Mullally Hunt and published by Puffin Books.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
So the motion by Carrie, the second by Stephen Jenkins. Any discussion?
Just another point for editing. In the agenda, it says that the curriculum committee reviewed the recommendation at its meeting on July 13th, which is tomorrow, not today. So that just needs to be edited in the notes.
On the expanded agenda, yes. Thank you. All right, move to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, 6-0. So are we going into executive session?
No, we're not. There's no need to go into executive session because the groups have not ratified their contracts yet. So we're close to that, but they're not ratified.
Okay, so at our next meeting. So there's one last agenda item.
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Aye. 6-0. Thank you, everyone, for a great meeting.